Hey, what's going on, DDO players? Axel here. So today we need to talk about lots of new feats that are coming with the Drannor expansion. There's a lot to say here. This was covered in the very last preview to Lamania only, which was about 2 weeks ago as of the time of this recording. It's a little bit confusing how I'm presenting this to you because they made an initial post and then there was a second dev post where they made changes based on Lamania feedback, but they didn't update the initial post with all that information. So I'm going to have to flip back and forth as I talk about this. So that's why you're going to see me alt tabbing. Also, I will link below in the description to the video, both of these posts, so you can read it for yourself if you want to. But yeah, let's just get into it. So a bunch of new feats are coming with the new expansion. They can be taken, all of them except for one are minimum level 21, so you can take them as Destiny feats or Epic feats. The exception is Titan's Blood, which is minimum level 34, so you got to be at cap, the new cap of 34 to take that one. So we'll get into that in a minute. Okay, let's get into the actual feats themselves. Probably the most debated one was the first one, which is Patience. So this is what you're seeing now is the second post from Steelstar. I'm going to flip back to the first post because this is where it's explained. It isn't really explained in the second post. But anyways, the first post kind of shows you what this feat does. So if you take Patience, your attack speed is reduced by 10%, but you gain a +1 critical multiplier with all weapons. It's an interesting approach to take for the feat. However, it's obviously going to be very build dependent, and I really dislike the design philosophy here that I have to do math now to find out if this feat helps me or hurts me. I think it's a better idea if all feats give some kind of benefit. I mean, at the minimum here with Patience, since you could take this if you don't really know what you're doing when you're building your character, you could take this and hurt your character. So I would hope that it's a toggle instead of being a permanent attribute to your character. So at least if you do take it and it hurts you, you could toggle it off at least. So anyways, it's obviously not very straightforward if this helps or hurts your character. It's very, very dependent on so many different factors. So it depends on your build, your gear, what your fighting style is. It depends on your melee range power. It depends on the content you're running. It depends on the difficulty of the content you're running. It depends on the frequency of which you're using active attacks. So things like Adrenaline or Quick Cutter. Depends on your playstyle generally. And probably many other factors I'm not discussing here. So whether this hurts or helps really also depends on particularly when it comes to fighting style. It's going to be more attractive to two-handed fighting characters, particularly those using Fury of the Wild and Adrenaline, or maybe also Quick Cutter to a lesser extent, but also range. Maybe if you really use Hunts In a lot. So if you use those kind of active attacks, it's going to help you more. But when going back to say like two-handed fighting characters, they're going to see the most benefit from this because two-handed weapons have the biggest base weapon damage. So they're going to benefit the most from the ×1 critical multiplier. They also don't have as many attacks, so the attack speed isn't going to loss of 10% is not going to cause them to lose as many attacks as it would say like a two-weapon fighting character who's going to have secondary attacks and such. Also, active attacks like Adrenaline, Hunts In, those aren't going to be affected by the -10% attack speed because those operate on a cooldown anyway, and they're active attacks. So you don't get less of them just because your attack speed is reduced by 10%. So where you're going to see a benefit is if you do use those active attacks and you get this +1 critical multi stacking with effects like Adrenaline and other actives like Boulder's Might, Barbarian Slaughter, Hunts In we just mentioned, to get a multiplicative damage effect. So it can add up, just a +1 crit multi when using all these actives with Adrenaline, with all these things, it can add up to a ton of extra damage, which does, in my calculations, I did spend quite a bit of time running different scenarios. And I'm finding that, yes, if you are using, say, if you're a two-handed fighting Great Ox Barbarian, for example, and you're mashing Adrenaline a lot, this +1 critical multi, yes, it does outweigh that attack speed penalty. Now, this is not true for other builds. So like two-weapon fighting, for example, with two-weapon fighting and a single-weapon fighting, these builds have lower base damage on their weapons because they're single-handed weapons, right? So they have lower base damage and they get a higher percentage of their damage from weapon effects, imbue dice, other things that are not base damage. So the attack speed penalty hurts them a lot more. So, when crunching the numbers, Generally, if you're tuning and fighting and you mash adrenaline a lot, well, it's particularly adrenaline. I didn't really look at quick cutter, but particularly adrenaline, you're probably getting quite a bit of overall damage increase that outweighs that negative 10% attack speed. Not to mention, if you're using Fury of the Wild, you're going to get a big boost from this feat to, say, the Epic Moment Unbridled Fury. I'm seeing a lot of different opinions on the forums on this. I mean, I've seen people post and say, "Oh no, this feat is always bad. It's a negative feat for everyone." But guys, the devs aren't stupid. They wouldn't put a feat out there if it always was negative. I mean, clearly intention to this feat is that it's going to benefit people who have big base attack damage, like 200 fighting characters, who are mashing actives that can give you a big multiplicative effect to do a lot of extra damage. Of course, if you want to see the biggest damage numbers in the game, I mean, there's also just a fun aspect to it. Maybe if min-max wise, it hurts your character in certain scenarios. I mean, a lot of people just like to see big numbers because big numbers are fun. There's also other practical implications to consider with this type of feat, because even if you're getting more damage on paper, a lot of the times it's still a penalty because that extra damage doesn't matter. So for example, if you're just questing a lot on Elite or R1 and killing trash mobs mainly, and you don't really raid or anything, or you don't really play high difficulty content like high skulls and stuff, it may not matter that you're getting a +1 critical multi, because whether you have a ×5 critical multi or a ×4, you're going to kill, you're overkilling anyway. Like, that extra damage doesn't matter. If something, like if a mob has 100,000 HP and you do 200k on a crit versus 300k on a crit, it doesn't matter. Like, that extra damage doesn't benefit you because the mob will die anyway. It's hard, and I really thought about how I wanted to present this in this video, because I don't want to mislead everyone, and I just want to say, I want to warn you, it really is so dependent on how you play and how you build your character and all those other factors I mentioned. So before you take this feat, you need to do the math yourself and find out for your play style, for your build, for your gear, if this is going to help you or not. So this kind of goes back to the feat design. I don't like that the feat is so ambiguous as to what benefit it gives you, and you have to do math to find out if this feat helps or hurts your character, and I really don't like that. So I would rather them just change this to something that's obviously going to just be a benefit to everyone, even though it would be, they probably don't want to do that for power creep reasons perhaps, which is a legitimate concern, but maybe just make it a smaller number. Maybe everyone, if you take this feat, you get instead of a +1, maybe a +0.25 multiplier with all weapons, period. That way it benefits everyone, but it still is not like a massive amount of power creep. I think people would still be attracted to something like that in a feat. I bet though, and this is just speculation, they're probably doing this in an effort to combat lag by reducing the number of attacks, number of things the game has to calculate is, in theory, going to reduce lag. So that's probably also the reason they designed it the way they did. But overall, yeah, I want to see them change this one, because it's just design level, it's just not great in my opinion. All right, let's go on to Erie Aim. So Erie Aim, you gain +5% dodge bypass, +5% deflection bypass, and flipping back to the second post now, here's a change that they made. So they added, after Lamania, they added +10 to attack on this feat as well. And they also said this change gives it some utility when not facing enemies with dodge, missile, deflection, and helps up accuracy for those who need it. So yeah, that's obviously a great change. With the +10 to attack, is going to make it useful to a large variety of builds for sure, because it doesn't really matter. Like, accuracy is a big part of your DPS. For anyone who doesn't know, it's a big part of your DPS at in-game, because particularly in legendaries, mobs get huge ACs. Like, to hit really doesn't matter very much in heroics, and not that much in epics either, but in legendaries it matters a lot. So if you're sitting there on a melee and you only have it cap, you're sitting there with like 120 attack to hit or something, then yes, this is gonna +10 to attack can make a huge difference in your DPS. But if you're sitting there already at 195 to hit, I don't know that going to 205 is really gonna help you much. Like, I think you kind of want to have at least like 150 to hit, 160 if you're on a melee DPS character. It's pretty decent, with 170 plus being very good. But if you're like below like 130 for sure, you're definitely going to want to get it higher. So if you're sitting there like below 150 to hit, you probably want to just take this for the plus 10 to attack alone, regardless of what the plus 5% deflection and dodge bypass do for you. All right, so overall, most characters are probably going to be attracted to this feat. Let's flip now back to Paranoid is the next feat. We're gonna have to flip back to the other post here because let's see, Paranoid. Here we go. Okay, so actually no, I was on the right one. Anyways, so here, Paranoid. What this feat does now in the bold version is what they changed. You take 10% less damage from traps, and you automatically spot almost all traps as you approach them. A couple things with this one. I don't really know what almost all means. Probably they just put that in there as a disclaimer because there's probably certain quest-specific mechanics. Maybe it doesn't affect. Maybe that's what they're doing. But I would assume for all normal, normal traps, you should be able to find them. Or not find them, but spot them with this feat. I don't really think this feat's going to be good, though. Maybe for new players who don't know where boxes are. But the thing with Spot, what Spot does for anyone who doesn't know, it'll give you the little indicator when you're near a trap that, oh my gosh, hey, your character senses a trap, but it doesn't actually find the box. So even if you have like a million Spot, you still need Search to find the box and obviously disable the trap. So I don't think this really matters because vets... Particularly for vets, because vets know where all the boxes are. Particularly ones that play trappers regularly, they know where the boxes are in these traps. So these quests, so they don't really need Spot. So I don't know about this. And then the minus 10% damage from traps. Okay, that's nice, I guess, but I can't see this being like super attractive for most players. I mean, maybe for new players, but again, you can just get a high Spot and probably be okay anyway. Since Spot works automatically anyways, I'm not really sure what benefit there is here. I mean, yes, I guess with this feat, you can have no investment in Spot and still benefit from full Spot. But if you're on a character like a Trapper, you have Spot as a class skill anyway, you can just invest in it to have good enough Spot instead of wasting a feat. So I don't know. I don't see this being too practical of a feat, but maybe for new players, it could be interesting. Or maybe you're like a hybrid build with only like 2 Trapper levels, and maybe you don't have room for Spot. Maybe it could be good. So, I don't know. It has some possibilities. Okay, next, Inspiring Bond. We need to flip back to the first post to see what this one is, because it wasn't repeated in the second post. So back to the first post. So this is what Inspiring Bond does. When your hireling or pets die, after 2.5 seconds, they're automatically resurrected and healed to full health. So, obviously, a lot of players are going to really, really like this because I know if you're a vet watching this, you're like, oh my gosh, who cares? It's hirelings. But a lot of players love hirelings and use them all the time. Particularly more casual players are going to love this feat. So I think that's cool. I mean, not every feat needs to be like designed from a min-maxing perspective, right? I mean, it's okay to have something like this for players particularly players who are new and learning the game. It's good to have a feat like this in there. I even think that this feat, so this is minimum level 21. I even think that a feat like this, they could create a heroic version, minimum level 1. I don't really see a problem with that. Maybe there's some quest-specific situations where you could cheese the quest with this. I don't know, but that's possible. But I don't really see the problem. Like, make a minimum level 1 version of this. Like, because hirelings are bad, and even if you're in a situation, you can't, like, just cheese your way through a quest with a hireling doing it normally, even with this, even if it reses itself constantly, because eventually you're going to have, if you're like in a tough boss fight and it's killing you and your hireling, like if your hireling raises, it's just going to die again. So it's not going to like be able to cheese you through quests, but it's nice. I mean, the thing this is really going to do is if your hireling dies in a trap or something, or just runs out and dies in I don't know, lava or something, this can definitely help you instead of having to raise it or go to a shrine or something. So that's cool. And then obviously the plus 25% PRR MRR is going to make him tougher generally. So yeah, soloers, casual players, I think are really going to like this. But it'll also give as I mentioned before, it will give the by proxy benefit of not solving, but kind of band-aiding the poor AI on certain hirelings. All right, let's get into defensive tumble. So defensive tumble, when you tumble for the next 3 seconds, you take 20% less damage from all sources except Bane. And in addition, the bonus to reflex saving throws you receive while actively tumbling is now applied to fortitude and will saving throws while tumbling. Okay, so when it comes to the damage portion here, clearly the developers are trying to incentivize Tumble, and we'll get into more Tumble feats here in a minute. But I generally don't like tumbling when I play DDO, just because I tend to run DPS characters. And if you're tumbling, then that's going to hurt your DPS, because time spent tumbling is time where you can't DPS. So you might lose a swing or two. So I don't really like that. I find that in DDO, it's generally better, instead of relying on, say, like Tumble, as they're trying to incentivize and have been trying to incentivize over updates, it's better to defend yourself with PRR and HP, because those defensive mechanisms, or concealment and corporality, whatever, those don't cost you DPS like Tumble does. Like if you tumble, you can't DPS because there's an opportunity cost there, right? So, but if you have enough PRR, DPS, or PRR and HP to go just to power through it, you don't have to lose DPS. So yeah, I don't really see myself using that, but I will say I'm biased. I don't really like using Tumble and DDO, period. There are certain builds that could really like this, particularly for tanks. This could be really good for sudden, predictable spike damage, such as maybe you're tanking a raid boss and you're about to get hit by a spike DPS or something, or maybe like you're in a circle, like a Vengeance Reaper circle or something, and you're going to get hit. Maybe you can tank your way through like a defensive, like a circle like that. Like there's several different mobs that throw out circles and other things you need to get out of. So maybe there's some situation, purely for tanks, where this is nice. Moving on now to Trick Shot, and this one has changed. So we need to hop over to the second post here. So now this feat reads, when you tumble, you gain 40 range power for 4 seconds. In addition, your tumble charges recharge 0.5 seconds faster. This change in Defensive Tumble's version of this change, which stacks, lets you use these feats slightly more frequently, and also supports other tumble trigger abilities in the game. So it could be good when, 40 range power is not trivial. So it could be good when combined with other burst DPS range abilities like Hunt's End I mentioned. Only 4 seconds is pretty rough though, so I don't know how practical this feat is going to be. And as mentioned before, you have the opportunity cost of where if you tumble, you're going to miss a couple projectiles there while you're tumbling. So I don't know. I personally, from a playstyle perspective, I don't really enjoy a feat like this that only works on that requires tumble and also works for such a small duration. I would rather have a much smaller bonus to range power that's permanent. But hey, yeah, that's just me. But maybe for those YO range folks who want to see those big numbers, maybe you'll like this. It depends on how much you care about tumble, how much you mind tumbling and increasing your APM, or action per minute, in the game to get a little extra DPS. Okay, so Titan's Blood. This one we need to flip back to the first post. So Titan's Blood. This is the one that is minimum level 34. So what this does is it gives you plus 10% legendary bonus to maximum hit points. So legendary bonus, this is the same percent bonus that you get from your Feywild Winter when you have the fourth piece applied. This is the same bonus from Legendary Greensteel. It's the same bonus that's going to be applied to several different Myth Drannor items, including both the heroic and legendary shields. Yeah, the legendary shield has the heroic shield has a legendary bonus to hit points on it, which is kind of nuts. But anyways, so this feat is obviously going to be super attractive to a lot of players, and I think it's pretty much going to kill the need to have that fourth Feywild Winter set. It's definitely going to make those 4-piece Feywild Winter sets. Maybe you still want a 3-piece, but the 4th piece is not going to be as necessary now. And this one is only level 34, and it seems like I'm not quite sure what other options are there. There's not a lot of other options, so I think a lot of characters are going to take this by default just because there's not a lot of other options, and 10% hit points is a lot. But another big benefit of this, you're like, okay, you might say, okay, well, this is available in other places, but if you take it through the feat, it's going to free up your gear set to gear. Instead of having that Feywild Winter 4-piece set, you could fit something else in that will give you more DCs, more stat abilities, more DPS, whatever, from a different set. So it definitely helps with the loot Tetris. If you're someone who really needs that legendary bonus to hit points, and maybe you don't have any Reaper points or something, you're on a first light character, that's going to help you a lot. So another thing to point out is how this affects tanks. Tanks are probably going to ignore this, not because tanks are going to have other options, particularly with Myth Drannor. Like the tower shield is going to have a plus 20%. The large shield is going to have a plus 15% legendary bonus hit points. Obviously, you can still do legendary green steel if you want. So I don't think a lot of tanks will take this, just because a lot of them will probably want to shoot for a higher than 10% legendary bonus hit points. Okay, let's go to the next one, guarded actions. Whenever you use an action boost, you take 20% less damage for 6 seconds. This isn't bad. I like this better than the Tumble version of this feat, because action boosts don't have a opportunity cost the way Tumble does. So for my play style, I would rather, like, if you're on your 2-weapon fighter or whatever, and you're wailing on a raid boss, you can mash this and it doesn't hurt your DPS, unlike tumbling, which you'll lose swings, right? Because you're tumbling. So I like that. It's not bad. It's only 6 seconds. But if you're a high action boost character that uses them all the time, like you're running in Legendary Dreadnought, Kensei or something, like you're gonna have like a Kensei Legendary Dreadnought, which is what I'm running on my main DPS character right now for raiding. This is gonna be pretty useful, I think. Not amazing, but it's pretty nice, because you're gonna benefit from that a lot. So there could be situations where you are saved by this. So it's not great, not horrible. It's all right. It's not bad. It's worth considering. Okay, the next one, Arcane Actions. This one changed a bit. So let me hop over to the second post. So this one in the first iteration was whenever you use an action boost, you get 100 competence bonus to universal spell power and +2 to spell penetration. This has been changed a lot. So what the dev said here is the original vision for the feat was for it to support primarily hybrid builds. So they've changed it to now it is whenever you use an action boost, you get +50 competence bonus to universal spell power and +2 to imbue dice for 6 seconds. So they doubled the duration, half the spell power, and change the spell penetration to imbue dice. So this one's okay. I don't really like the design philosophy, and a lot of people pointed out in this thread that they aren't a fan of all these short boosts, but it's nice to get an extra 2 imbue dice or extra 50 spell power for a quick boost to your burst DPS. I mean, it doesn't seem bad. It's worth considering, I think. At the minimum, all builds like ranged or melee should be using haste boost. So you're going to get some benefit regardless of what kind of DPS character you're running. Or even if you're a caster, you get 50. And now casters don't seem to use action boost as much. At least I don't when I play casters. But yeah, still you get some benefit from this. So this feat seems okay. I don't really see why this is on imbues. And I don't want to get into a whole imbue rant, but I really don't like the design of imbues in DDO at all. I just think it needlessly complicates the game for no reason, basically. The reason is imbues they're so good that they're mandatory on every build, yet you don't just give everyone an imbue toggle. I would rather this be just melee power or range power instead of imbue dice. I mean, why we keep tying more things to imbues while not just giving everyone an imbue toggle? If I was designing it, I would give everyone an imbue toggle at level 1 that gives you no extra damage, but just lets you benefit from imbues. And then we can just focus in the trees and adding imbue dice, because I don't like that some trees don't have it. And basically, if you don't have it in your tree, you're basically forced to splash to get it in another tree, like take one Dark Apostate or something. So I'm not a big fan of the way imbues are designed. So I'd rather see it be like melee or range power, or I would rather them just do a whole pass on imbues, but they probably won't do because imbues are pretty new. But anyways, that's my little mini rant about imbues, which I probably said before on this channel. Anyways, let's get into the next one, which is channel power. So we have to go back to the first post. So this one is interesting. So after blocking with an orb or staff for at least 3 seconds, you gain 100 competence bonus to universal spell power and +4 to all spell DCs for 3 seconds. So really short. It's interesting because here's the thing. Spellcasters in DDO, they don't really block. And for those that do, a lot of times are using a shield. But because this requires an orb or a staff, shield users can't benefit from it since orbs are offhand only. And staffs obviously are two-handed weapons. So you can't use a staff with a with a shield. So I'm not really sure what they're aiming for here. I mean, generally spellcasters who like this are they're not going to be defending by blocking, right? Your defense in DDO with a spellcaster, the way DDO is played is your defense is staying at range and jumping and moving. Like that's how DDO is played. You don't sit there and like block mobs when you're like a nuker caster or something. So I'm not really sure what they're going for here. There are probably certain builds that can benefit from this. I mean, the one that comes to mind for me would be any caster build that has a lot of passive DPS. So something like an Eldritch Spirit Warlock. Maybe you just stand there and you block and have that universal spell power bonus of 100 apply to your Eldritch Blast aura. So maybe it could be good for that reason. I can't really see, the spell DCs are nice, but I can't really see anyone relying on something like this to get them to the DC they need for their spells to work. So I'm not really sure if that helps. I'd rather it be like a percentage to crit damage or something rather than be to spell DCs. But yeah, I'm not sure but how practical this is going to be. I mean, I don't think I would ever take it just for practicality concerns, because you have to stand there and block for 3 seconds, but you can't move while you're blocking, obviously. And then you only get the benefit for 3 seconds. So obviously you lose DPS when you're blocking, because when you're blocking for 3 seconds, you can't really be DPSing, right? So as a caster. So I don't know how practical this is going to be. Are you guys excited about it? Are any of you like excited by this feat? I think if you have a lot of passive DPS, as I said before, maybe you like this, but I can't see most people using it. Let's go to Reverberating Shout. So this one, I'm not a fan. I don't really see what they're going for here. I don't see really anyone using this. So this is a tank feat. So activate to shout at all nearby creatures, intimidating them unless they make a will saving throw DC equal to your intim skill. This works on all creature types, including those normally immune to intimidate. So this is basically an alternate form of intimidate that seems to work like intimidate, except intimidate doesn't work on certain mobs like unintelligent creatures, whereas this is going to work on everything. And this also works on, unlike intimidate, this is going to work on a will saving throw, which does tend to be pretty low. I've noticed a lot, particularly when running like a 20 Dragon Lord using the Ravager capstone. I've noticed a lot of mobs tend to have a pretty low will save in DDO compared to other save types that are much higher. Like mobs seem to have a higher fort and reflex saves as opposed to will saves, which tend to be low. So that could be beneficial for this feat. However, I don't really see this being practical, because the thing is, it's not hard. The vast majority of creatures are not going to be immune to intimidate, and it's not very hard at all on a tank to get an intimidate score that is very, very effective. It's not like on my first life tank, I never see intimidate failing. So I'm not really sure the value here of having one that works on will saves, just because it's already pretty easy to get an intim that's going to work basically all the time. So in this feat also, you're going to have a high intimidate score anyway, because this feat requires intimidate. It works off intimidate. It's not like you have no investment required like that trapping feat we discussed before. You still have to have an intimidate skill to get that. So you can have intimidate anyway, and this only benefits you for certain creatures that aren't intelligent, and I'm not really sure if there's going to be a lot of situations where that matters. In situations where you are dealing with mobs that are immune to intimidate, you have other options, like you have shield toss from Sentinel, right? So that will work. So I don't really see the point of this feat, since you can already do all this without having Reverberating Shout just through regular intim, a mix of regular intim and shield toss. So all in all, the feat just doesn't seem necessary to me. I mean, you guys let me know. Do you disagree? Do you think it's useful? I just don't see myself ever taking this on a tank. But y'all tell me what you think below. Okay, Face Me. Another tanking feat here. So whenever you use an action boost, your threat generation is increased by 200% for 6 seconds. Really not a fan of this one either, because a couple reasons here. 200%, it's not a lot. I think in my first life tank, I think I was around like 1200% threat, 1100%, something around there. So an extra 200%, it's nice, but it's not like a lot. You get a lot more benefits than 200% in enhancements and epic destinies And the other thing is, in my experience in tanking in DDO in 2024, hate tanking is just difficult because so many DPS characters can do just incredible amounts of DPS. So even with your threat scaling, it's difficult to keep up with that. Even if you have like 1,000%, 1,300% hate, it's really difficult to keep up with some of this burst DPS that other characters are capable of. So all in all, you in effect you're relying. Most tanks seem to rely because of this on a combination of intimidate and shield toss to get aggro and to keep aggro. So I'm not really sure, like just getting 200% more from a feat that also work. Even if you got flat 200%, I wouldn't really be attracted to this feat at all. But you're also only get this for 6 seconds and only when using an action boost. So I think this should be probably just a higher flat bonus as a feat. Like, I don't know, maybe just a flat 500% threat as a feat. That would be more worthwhile. That works all the time, not just on an action boost. Or if it is only an action boost, I mean, it should be much higher, but even then it probably wouldn't be attractive. Just it being tied to an action boost makes it not very attractive at all, at least on my tank. I'm not really big on action boost because with a tank, you're not focused on DPS, right? So if you're not focused on DPS, you're not using, like, haste boost doesn't mean nearly as much to you as it does on, say, like a DPS melee, for example, because haste boost is a massive bonus to your DPS, but as a tank, you're using Intim and Shield Toss anyway. You don't really care about DPS as much because you're not a DPS character, so you're not really using a lot of action boosts. Yeah, so I just overall, I mean, I don't see this being very useful. I can't imagine anyone taking this. So I think this one should be redesigned and improved quite a bit. So yeah, guys, that's my thoughts on the feats. A lot to say. I know this was a long video, but there was a lot to talk about. So guys, let me know what you think about these feats. Do you agree with me? Do you disagree? Do you think I am wrong about something? Please comment below. Let me know. That's going to be it for today, guys. Hope you enjoyed the video. I'll see you all next time. Have a good one. Take care.